Welcome to the July edition of IndiePie. I'm super glad to have everyone here today. Make sure to stick around for the whole event because we have 2 subscriptions to PyCharm to give away and 1 really cool Adafruit PyPortal compliments of JFrog. So make sure to stick around. If you're registered in the Zoom, I will be doing a random drawing and we'll give those out at the end of the presentation. Next month, we have Kapil from Stacklet. He will be talking about saving money in the cloud with Cloud Custodian. So make sure you mark your calendars and join us for the August edition of IndiePie, which will be held on the traditional second Tuesday of the month. And if you are interested in speaking at IndiePie, we're always looking for speakers. Please submit your talk ideas to papercall.io/IndiePie. And we would love to have you speak. Tonight, make sure that we're going to try to use Slack as our main communication as opposed to the Zoom chat, just because it stays around and people can add reactions and read even if they're not attending. So join us at IndiePie if you are at the IndiePie Slack, bit.ly/join-IndiePie.slack. And that's where we'll be answering questions. If you have any, we also have a jobs channel in there. So if you are looking for a job or have a job that you're hiring, please post your jobs in there and we will try to connect to you. Make sure you're also following us on Twitter at IndiePie or using the hashtag IndiePie. We will be doing some tweeting tonight, but please feel free to include your own tweets as well. And we just wanted to do a quick shout out to all of our sponsors. 6 Feet Up. IndiePie is actually organized by 6 Feet Up. We are a Python and AI for good consulting company that empowers tech leaders to make informed decisions, access accurate data faster, and scale up our operations. Our engineers specialize in application development, AI, big data, and cloud technology. Our impactful clients focus on climate action, clean energy, and initiatives that benefit humankind. I am Laura Stevens. I am the VP of Marketing at 6 Feet Up, and I am super thankful to have all of you guys here today. Our platinum sponsor is JetBrains. As I mentioned, we will be giving away 2 licenses, 1-year licenses to PyCharms at the end of Andy's presentation. So do not leave early. Make sure to stick around because you must be present to win. And also thank you to our bronze sponsor, JFrog. They are giving away a Adafruit PyPortal, super cool little device. So make sure to stick around for that too. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, you can email me, laura@6feetup.com, or visit indiepie.org to become a sponsor. And we'd love to have you join our group of people. And without further ado, the reason you're all here is not to hear me talk, but it is to hear Andrew Knight share all of his knowledge and expertise. So, Andy, you take it away. I'm sorry for my technical difficulty there.
No worries. It happens. Hello, everyone. Can we see the main slide here?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you, Laura and 6 Feet Up and IndiePie for inviting me to come speak tonight. My name is Andrew Knight. You might know me as Pandy. I am the automation panda. For a number of years, I have been a software engineer and test where I focus on building high quality into products and building high scale test automation projects to help do that. Currently, I work as the principal developer advocate at a company called Applitools. We focus on automated visual testing techniques backed by AI. Pretty cool stuff. With Applitools, I'm also director of a program called Test Automation University. If you've heard of it, drop it in the chat. Let me know. Much love for TAU. Test Automation University is a free online platform where we offer free courses about testing, automation, and quality to the community from some of the world's best instructors. So if you want to learn about PyTest, I have a course out there on that. If you want to learn about Selenium, you want to learn about API testing, you want to learn how to make a good strategy, tons of instructors, all those courses available, and it is completely for free. So be sure to check it out. tonight here in this talk, we're going to learn how to do full stack Python. It's 2023, software is ubiquitous in our world today. And the cool thing is we can build pretty much anything with software. Historically, perhaps, we may have thought about software in terms of locked to a particular computer or machine. Like I'm streaming from a laptop right now. I do my programming on here. I make a little math calculator and boom, it spits out some numbers. But pretty much any device that we encounter, phones, even like stovetops and refrigerators and little toys these days, they all have software in it. Software plus hardware equals cool little automata that run around. And it's happened pretty fast. I remember the iPhone came out when I was still in college. That doesn't seem like that long ago. I don't feel that old. But being in software gives us the power that we can literally build anything. We can solve any problem. We can make anything whirl or buzz or go. And that's pretty awesome. I don't know of any other discipline or field or profession that can claim that type of incredible power. But then the question comes, how do we go about building all these things? There are a number of different tools and technologies that we can use to build the software that powers our world. And here I've just shown a bunch of icons for just different programming languages, not even tools or frameworks. Just languages. Of course, I'm guessing pretty much everyone here is familiar with Python. I think that's a pretty safe bet given this is IndiePy. But I'm sure many of you have also used other things like Java, C#, PHP maybe, Ruby back in the day. Rust seems to be the darling of the Python community right now for some reason. I don't know. Perl, man, I spent 4 years at NetApp doing nothing but Perl. That was a weird time. C++, Go, JavaScript, right? So there's a ton of different ways that we can try to build our software. I'm just curious in the chat, let us know like some of the things you've built and some of the languages and tools you've used, because I just want to see the variety that we've got here. Now, like I said, we're probably all very familiar with Python because this is IndiePy. And if you've been around the Python community for any length of time, you've probably heard this phrase, that Python is the second best language for everything. Why? Because Python is very universal. It has a lower learning curve, arguably, than other languages. There's a package seemingly for everything. And so this line is a bit of a quip to be like, well, maybe Python isn't necessarily your number one choice, but it sure can do a heck of a lot of cool stuff. But tonight, I want to challenge this statement, because I believe that Python is the best language for doing everything together. I'm gonna let that sink in again. I don't think Python is the second best language for doing everything. I think Python is the best language for doing everything together. Most languages have a particular domain or scope that inherently limits them, right? For example, JavaScript is stuck in the browser for the most part. It jumped outside with Node, I get it. But historically, it was a browser-centric, web dev-centric language. Or something like Perl. Perl was the duct tape of the internet. How much Perl is still being done today, right? Languages like C and C++ and even Rust, very heavy in like systems programming, maybe some desktop development, but these days it's kind of stuck there. But Python has found its way into just about everything, right? We have web development in Python. We have sysadmin in Python. We have data science and data engineering in Python, and AI that has taken over. And as I said before, there's pretty much a Python package for everything. There's even an XKCD comic about that. Python really has transcended most of the boundaries that have limited other languages. And so my thesis is that we can use Python as the best language when we want to do multiple things that might seem disparate, but we want to do them all together. And so to that end, I want to show you all how to do full stack Python. Top to bottom, left and right, A-B. You can do Python through and through, stay entirely within the Python ecosystem and still be successful. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to show a web app that I've developed completely in Python. This is an app that I call Bulldoggy, the reminders app. Now, granted, this is a small little example project. It's not meant to be productionalized or anything. But it is nevertheless an example of a full stack Python. If you want to give this a try and you want to dig into the code yourself, here's a link to the GitHub repository for it. Got a QR code on the screen. You can scan with your phone. You can also just type in the link github.com/automationpanda. That's my username /bulldoggy-reminders-app. So this is a very basic app. It's basically got 2 pages. First page is a login page where you can type in a username and password. I have some pre-configured ones in there. If you want to rip open the code and try it yourself, you can change them. But anyway, you post your login and then you come to the main page, which is the reminders page. Now on this main page, you have a set of reminder lists on the left where you can make a list, something like chores. And then when you create that list, you can add items to that list. For example, what are the chores you have to do? Buy groceries, mow the lawn, walk the dog, wash dishes. For each one of these, you can add new items, you can delete items, you can strike them out when you're done, you can edit the text. Furthermore, you can also have multiple different lists. Maybe you have chores as well as groceries, as well as projects. One of the lists that I usually have on my phone for reminders, I have a French Bulldog puppy. Her name is Suki, hence the name of the app, Bulldoggy. And I have all these things I have to remember to do, right? I have to remember to take her out for potty. I have to remember to feed her, to give her fresh water, to take her to the vet, to get her vaccines and all these different things, right? So fun times. Now, this is a fully dynamic modern web application. How I've built this, and we'll jump into the demo and the code in just a moment, but it follows a basic model view controller pattern. The model for the data underneath of it, all those reminder lists and reminder items, I'm storing that in a database using and modeling it with Pydantic models. I've used TinyDB because I wanted to keep it super simple and anybody can just use it, not have to worry about any sort of big connectors or whatnot. But if you wanted to, you could refactor a little bit and use something like Postgres or MySQL or whatever, or I mean, MongoDB even. I just wanted this to be a quick example people would check out and have like a text-based DB on their machine. But then the higher level of that is with Pydantic, you can set data models for objects like reminder list or reminder items. So that makes it a little more generic. The view is controlled with Jinja templates. If you are familiar with any sort of web frameworks in Python, oh yeah, templating, got it. If you're new to it, we all know that websites are made up of HTML pages with CSS styling, right? HTML is like the structure and the bones, the CSS gives the color and the skin and the flavor. Jinja templates are just a way that you can basically make web pages, like code them up, but then have swappable bits in them. Like, hey, I want to input a particular number or name or field, and maybe have a little bit of if-else logic at the time that the page is rendered, and then the application sends it to the browser. That's basically what templating does in a nutshell. So I'm using Jinja templates to kind of to structure out what the login page looks like, what the reminders page looks like, how I can fill those different rows that you saw. It's all Jinja templates. And then the controller behind it is FastAPI. That's the primary Python-based web framework that is controlling what's going on here. If you've used FastAPI, awesome, you know how it works. If you haven't, it's very similar to like Django or Flask or Pyramid, Flow. I mean, all the Python web frameworks kind of have a certain way about them. Even though each is distinct and has its own benefits, they all kind of have similarities. So I chose to use FastAPI because I've used Django in the past. I've used Flask. They're all good. For this project, I used FastAPI because. And so what happens is whenever you would make a request, like you want to get a particular page, like get the reminders page, that request goes, it's an HTTP request that would go to the FastAPI application that you built, have the route, and then it would return the rendered template for the page that you requested, and that's the view. What makes this a little more fun, though, and how I can get away calling it a full stack Python app, is that all the dynamic interactions are controlled with HTMX, which is actually a JavaScript-esque library that lets you encode these dynamic interactions purely in hypertext. It's really cool, and we're going to see how that works. So that way I can make a fully modern dynamic web application without having to code any JavaScript myself. So I can stay in my Python ecosystem, a little bubble, my happy place, and keep it all in one language, and it's really effective. So let's demo this. Oopsie, here we go. Oh crap, where is, I'm sorry, I'm flipping through pages here. There's my code. Okay, no secrets were shared, that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna show you the Bulldoggy reminders app running locally. I have the project open here. Again, you can go to GitHub, you can check out the repo, you can run it yourself. It's all Python. I've created a virtual environment. I've got this, oh, this is open in Visual Studio Code. So I'm at the terminal, I'm going to run this app, and then it's going to run locally. I'll open up the page, and here's the login page. Yay, fun times. Cool, cool. This is a very standard login page. All it does is an HTTP post. It has my username and password already in there. Pythonista, I heart testing. Wow. So let's log in. Oh, look at that. It also lights up. Cool. So here is the main page. So if I wanted to, I could create a new list. Let's call it puppy stuff because I love my French bulldog. And boom, you can see I hit enter. Dynamically, it changed the page. It created a new puppy stuff list. It doesn't have any reminders in it yet, but I can say things like take a walk. Boom, I could say something like pick up or buy kibbles, change the water bowl, get vaccines, I don't know, stuff like this. If I wanted to say, hey, I took the dog for a walk, boom, I could click it and it just strikes it out. Maybe I have a particular kind of kibbles I want to buy the special kibbles, I don't know. Or let's say, oh, I don't want to change the water bowl, I can delete that, right? So it's got the full dynamic interactions here. I can change lists, I can change back and you can see it's saved. I can even refresh the page. Oh, yep, you can see the data actually persists. It's not just some little JavaScript in browser trick. It actually saved it to the database. So it's all there. So now what I want to do is I want to go into the code and kind of show you a little bit about how this works to prove that this is actually full stack Python. And so here we go. Let's see, where do we want to start? Let's start with the models. So I claimed that there was a TinyDB database being stored on my local machine, and the data models were being modeled by Pydantic. So in my project under app utils, there is a Python module called storage. And in here, this module handles persistence layer for the app. Yeah. So I've got my Pydantic models here. I have three things. I've got the reminder item. This models an item in a list. I have a reminder list, which models the list of items. And I've got a selected list, like the one that's actively being shown, because as you saw, like when I show puppy stuff, the other lists are there, they're just not being displayed. And so the fields for these are very basic, right? There's an integer ID for each of them, so I can do easy lookup. You know, for the reminder item, there's a list ID for like the place it's in the list. There's the description of it, you know, buy kibbles, go to the vet, those kinds of things. And the status of it, if it's completed or not. If it's completed, then it's struck out. If it's not completed, it's just regular text. The reminder list, you've got the ID of the list, you have an owner, you know, the owner is the user who is logged in. You have, the name of the list, that kind of thing. And then for the selected list that's being displayed, not only do you have all those fields, but you also have the list of reminder items that are being displayed with it. So again, pretty straightforward data model. I also have this thing called a reminder storage class. All this is doing is basically translating between Pydantic models and the actual TinyDB database. TinyDB is basically like, it's a document database. Imagine a Python dictionary save to a file. Ta-da, you know half of TinyDB, yay. Super simple. That's why, again, this is meant for demonstration purposes, so I want to keep it simple. But you can see like I've created a TinyDB object. There are certain tables in the TinyDB object. You can see I'm saving it in this JSON file. I mean, in fact, I could probably, where is it? Here we go. I could open it up. I know it's not prettyfied, but you can see it's storing everything in plain JSON. If you wanted to come in here and hack it and be dangerous, be my guest. If you run this on your own machine, you'll get your own copy. So yeah, again, not productionalized, but examplized, for lack of a better word. But the storage class has just a bunch of helper methods for things like, hey, I want a way to create a list. You know, that way we're abstracting, we can say create list instead of having to make these calls raw every time. So like, okay, I'm passing in the name of the list I want to create. It creates the dictionary object and inserts it into the right table and returns the ID that was created for it. Or if I want to get the list, right, it can look up, it can take in the list ID, it can fetch it from the database, you know, do a little bit of data cleanup, put it into the Pydantic model and then return the Pydantic model so that the callers are really working with objects rather than just like raw dictionary data. And so that's pretty much all that's going on in the storage class here. You know, nothing fancy. You can gorge your eyes out. I mean, a lot of repetitive stuff, there's some protections in there to make sure you don't do stupid things, but it's just meant to be that persistence layer, that intermediary. So that's the model. If we now take a look at the view, as we saw in the app, there were two pages. There's the login page and the reminders page. And as we know, with web apps, views are basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all combined together. And the way that I am rendering these, rather than using raw HTML, they're using Jinja templates. So we can look in the templates directory of our projects, and we can see we have pages and we have partials. We'll get to what partials mean in a moment. But let's start by just looking at the login page. So this here is, I mean, it's essentially an HTML document, right? So it's got like the head that's calling in the CSS, so it's all styled nice and pretty. We've got, you know, the title, Bulldoggy reminders app. You can see there's the username and password inputs. And so this is actually in a form so that when I type in my username and password and I hit the submit button, this application will just, it will post, the method is post to the login resource with these particular fields. Now there's nothing fancy about that. That is straight HTML, straight browser. This is like 1990 something. Simple is better than complex, right? No need to complicate this. There are some, if you look down here, there are some extra little fields that we could add to our login page. These are some of the Jinja template things. For example, if you were to type in an invalid password or something, on the FastAPI side, it can route and give you a parameter and stuff and pop that into here. And then if that flag is given, then it can display error messages like invalid login, or like when you log out, you can have a successfully logged out message. And that's just, again, that's just a little bit of the Jinja templating, nothing fancy there. But now let's look at the reminders page, because the reminders page template is a bit more complex. I wouldn't say it's complicated. I would say it's complex. Complex is better than complicated. But we can see, like, just real quick, you know, on this page, we have this kind of title banner. The left side are the lists, and then the right side are the list items pertaining to the selected list. If we look inside the HTML for this one, we can see at the top, we've got the body, we've got the title card. That's that top thing across the top. It's got the Bulldoggy, it's got the logo, the little cute pupper. And then also it says reminders for owner, if you recall here, reminders for whatever the username was. Again, that was a little bit of the cool templating. We can pop in the username and be clever, right? Again, but nothing, again, just straight like templating stuff. But then for the main body, that's where things get complex. We're going to include one of our partials. A partial template that I'm using here is kind of like saying, rather than having the whole page in one template, maybe there are certain pieces that I can kind of put together like Lego blocks. So the partials for the content, that's going to be under partials, reminder content. This is where we're going to have our reminders lists as well as the reminders items. And that's the left and right columns. And even here, you can see there are more partials being used. Why? Because it's a very list-like structure. There's different rows, right? Each row is its own little div or whatever. And so basically each row is its own template. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? So I can have however many rows I need to load. There's even a for loop to grind through for each reminder list, or in the list of reminder lists, or for each item in the list of items that's been selected. I can pop them out. All right, so let's look at the new list row HTML file. So what happens when I create a new list? Right now, it's on the kind of regular reminders page. But as soon as I click this, it's sending a click interaction to this particular part of the page for which that new reminders list partial template is being rendered. And if I click it, what happens? The element changes. I'll click away and do it again. So before it was kind of, just like a text field, there's a little plus sign. When I click it, it becomes an input field and I can actually start typing stuff. And then not only that, but the icons to the right of it also changed. There's a check mark and an X, right? How it was able to change that is where the HTMX comes in. That hypertext, whatever extension, I don't know what that thing stands for. But this is the partial for that particular element. It's a div. It's got the paragraph for the new list. We saw that. And it's got this little icon for the little ads thing. But then there's all this stuff. And there are special attributes. HX get, HX trigger, HX swap. These are the HTMX attributes that control the dynamic operations. So what this is saying is, hey, on this particular div element, meaning that row that we had, whenever you have a trigger of a click event, meaning I click on that particular div, what I want you to do is I want you to call an HTTP GET request. This is all AJAX. Give me a GET request to this particular resource in my application, reminder/new list row edit. And with whatever content you get back from this resource, I want you to do an HTML swap of this particular element with whatever HTML code that gives me back. So what's happening is we're doing an AJAX call of HTTP get some new hypertext and swap it with this particular element here anytime it's clicked. So if we now go to look at, well, what does this resource return? This is where we have to jump into FastAPI. So we can go into app routers and then the reminders module. And we're looking for, what was it called? This particular path. So, okay. Oh, get rid of that because that's, okay, here we go. So here in my FastAPI code, I have a route for getting that new list row edit. So anytime that thing is clicked, HTMX is making an AJAX call to this resource with this route. And so what does this resource do? It's going to get the context from the request, and it's going to return a template response, meaning go to another template and render it and return that value as text. And the template that it's going to render and return is the partials reminders new list row edits. Okay, so if we go back to our templates, new list row edits, this is different HTML here. So if we recall, going back here, so I click this, that sends the AJAX call, new HTML comes back. And so now instead of having a paragraph, we should have an input field. And we should have, instead of having one icon, we should have two icons on the side, which is exactly what this particular template is showing. We still have a div, but we now have an input. And then we have two icon images, one of which is the icon check circle and icon X circle. Boom. Fully dynamic interaction, no need to code my own JavaScript. It was all handled in hypertext. That is the beauty of HTMX. You can do basically any kind of HTTP or AJAX call like this. Get, post, put, patch, delete, all straight in here. Swapping elements, adding elements underneath. There's a couple little cool tricks you can do. If you want to learn about it all, you can go to htmx.org. They have a Docker tutorial page. It doesn't take too long to read. You kind of look at it and you go, oh, I can do this. That's what happened to me, at least. I was like, this is amazing. But just like that, we can basically play this game of swapping hypertext as we want it. Because ultimately, what are dynamic interactions doing? You're on a web page, you do something, and that triggers an interaction that if you want to see something change dynamically, what do you have to do to make it change dynamically? You change the structure of the HTML and CSS. That's, in a nutshell, that's all these front-end frameworks are doing. React, Angular, Next, Nuxt, I don't even know all these different names, Vue, Svelte, that's all they're doing. They're just doing it in very fancy, complex, arguably complicated ways. HTMX is a way to be like, no, we can simplify it and put it in hypertext. Like the way I kind of view it is this is like the missing piece of HTML. Maybe that's just me, but I think it's really cool because now I can focus my attention on the like actual critical logic of my application. What are these routes? What's happening in persistence? What are the interactions I'm actually trying to do? And less on trying to figure out how to code some API thing with AJAX and having the same duplicate JavaScript code everywhere, or have to put on some JavaScript front end to tie in with my Python backend just to make it look like a normal application, right? I don't need that. I can be simple. Simple is better than complex. So, I mean, if we wanted to take this further, you know, what happens when I am with this input element here? I can be like, hey, more stuffs, right? And I can click this checky mark, and that creates a new list with a blank set of list items. It puts it in focus. How do we trace that interaction? Same thing here. So here was the circle check. What happens? The trigger. Here are all my HTMX stuff. It's a little bit more than the last one. So what's going on here is the trigger is if I click it, or I could do things like if I push the enter key, as long as it's from a different thing. What do I want to do? I want to call a post request to this particular route, which will create a new list and then give me back the new HTML to put on the page. What I'm trying to include here, this is a CSS selector that points to this particular input element, right? If this is the CSS selector for where the attribute name equals reminder list name. So input name equals reminder list name. What this include does is it will take whatever value is in this input element and add it as a query parameter to this request. So when you post this request, it has the name of the list that you want to create with it. So that can be input into the actual creation of the list in your FastAPI code. And so if we were to look at this new list row, oopsie, oh gosh. Where's the, move the zoom thingy. So if I look at this list or this, that's the get, we need the post. So here's the post for that new list row creation. You can see it is, here's the method, and it is receiving the reminder list name from the form because it was posted, right? So here's just a FastAPI quick parse way to get out those parameters and stuff. And what am I doing? I'm saying, hey, storage, that's the model we saw before, storage.create list with the reminder name that you were posting to me. Give me the list ID. Then, hey, storage, make that list the one that is selected, meaning it's the one that's currently being displayed on the screen. And then, hey, return, and here's a helper method that basically says, regenerate the whole page and send that back to be what you display, right? So I'm gonna, because I added the new list, there's a lot of pieces on that page that need to be re-rendered. So let me just grab all that stuff and give it back. Oops. And so in this case, the target for the HTML chunk to re-render is not just this particular row. You have to affect the entire content area, right? You want to get the list and list item name. So here I've given another CSS selector that says, hey, swap the content that you get for this reminders content, the whole content area. So that way it's not just localized, you can affect things elsewhere on the page as well. So pretty cool stuff. I know it might be a little bit mind-bendy at first to wrap your head around it, but definitely like look into it, give it a try, read up on the HTMX docs if you really want to learn how to do it. It's one of those things where it seems a little strange at first, and then all of a sudden light bulb hits and you're, oh, I got it. And then you're just like, I have all the power. Right. So it's really cool stuff. I could keep going through all the different paths of all the different interactions, but they all pretty much happen the same. If you do go to htmx.org, so they've got, whoopsie, they do have their docs. This is what I was referring to. It gives a pretty thorough walkthrough of how you can do all the beginner, intermediate, and advanced stuff. There are also, where is it? They have example projects I want to show. Here we go. So they have some like little recipes, but then they also have a list of example projects using HTMX. You don't have to use HTMX with Python. You can use HTMX with basically any kind of backend. You could be doing Java on the backend, C#, could be doing Python. Maybe you have a Node backend and you just want to simplify your front end. I know there's a contingent of people who are using OCaml with HTMX. It seems like a very popular niche. Cool, more power to them. But you can see a whole bunch of different things. Within Python, you can come here and you can see they've got examples for Django, FastAPI, Flask, Py4Web. If you notice, look which one is on the official page. Bulldoggy made it. Yes. I've been recognized. Right. So I mean, but it's like you can do it with basically any kind of backend, because all HTMX is doing is pulling your API calls, your AJAX calls into hypertext. You know, so you can focus on hypertext for your front end and then focus on logic for your back end, and keeps it very nice, straightforward. I also want to say I am no HTMX expert. I stumbled across this. How I found out about this, I saw a talk at PyBay back in 2021 from Michael Kennedy. He's the guy who does Talk Python. And he showed HTMX with Django or Flask, I forget which one. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then like a year and a half later, I finally was like, okay, maybe I should try this out for myself. But I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna do FastAPI. Why? I don't know. I'm weird. I just did it. And I figured it out. And it's like, okay, cool. So it is possible, right? It's not like you need some very specific tutorial or you have to do a very specific set of steps or else you get it wrong. It's like you can kind of make it work. Pretty cool. So let me come back to the slides here. Oh my gosh, Zoom thingy, get out the way. Here we go. Oh shoot, there was more I had to show. Shoot. I'm sorry. I forgot. There's so much here to show. I forgot about some of it. So other things that are part of this project, you know, we've seen how we can have front end and back end in Python. It's like, okay, technically we've achieved full stack Python. There's a little more we can do. We can do, where is it? We can do all of our API calls in Python as well, right? It's not just like a front end thing that we can kind of sidestep having to do JavaScript. In Bulldoggy, under the app routers API module, I have a full REST API that you can use, right? That you can basically, instead of having to go through the front end and type in all the things for your lists and items, you can make straight API calls. And in fact, we can, if I go to, the docs page, you can actually see the full, what's it called? Swagger docs, the open API docs for all of it here. You can see everything spelled out. You can see documentation on it. This is automatically generated by FastAPI. So you can see that, hey, you can go through the backdoor too, all Python. Other things you can do with Python, you can test your application completely in Python, right? If you know me, the Automation Panda, I love testing. Usually I end up talking about testing. So you couldn't have a bona fide Automation Panda talk without talking about testing. Here we are. Welcome to the testing part. So it's fairly conventional in Python that you put all of your test code in a directory called tests, whether you're using unit test or PyTest as your framework. Personally, I strongly prefer PyTest. I think PyTest has a lot of advantages, a lot more flexible. You can have plugins, all that kind of stuff. So all these tests are written in PyTest. And if you want to learn more about PyTest, you can go to Test Automation University. We have a course on that. The PyTest docs are great. One nice thing about PyTest is you can use it for pretty much any kind of functional testing. So here I have an example of a unit test that I've written in PyTest. What this unit test does is it tests the serialization of my security token. I'm using JWT for token authentication, all that stuff. So here I want to make sure that when I put a token in and I deserialize it, it all gets out okay. Very common, straightforward kind of unit test, right? I'm testing code. I'm testing something is coded right. I can make API tests as well. With API tests, I'm using a framework called Playwright. Playwright is awesome. You can do API and UI testing, super cool. So here's a test for successful API login. You can see that it is calling the Bulldoggy API post with a login with a given username and password. And I'm making sure that the response is okay. I got the right URL that showed I actually did a login and that it gave me the right cookie, right? Again, fairly basic kind of API test. And I can even test the UI. I can do full-blown browser-based web UI testing. Again, I'm using Playwright. And so here's a test for a successful login, as if you were a user. I like to write my tests using a range act assert pattern, given when then language, given the login page is displayed, page.goto. This is a Playwright call. When the user logs into the app with valid credentials, find the username, fill it with the username, fill it with the password, look for the login button, click it. Then the reminders page is displayed. I have all my expect page to have this, to have that, for this to be visible, for this to have text, right? And then what else am I checking here? Oh, I'm making sure it says reminders for your particular username. So again, kind of smoke level-y unit or UI test, but nevertheless, it's testing and it's all in Python. I didn't have to jump to Cypress to do this and do it in JavaScript. I didn't have to whip out Selenium in Java to do this. Python, Python, Python. And if you want to see this bad boy run, oops, zoom things in the way aside. Give me, hold on one second. Let me make my life easy. Let me pull up a new terminal. Yes, it activated my virtual environment. So I can say python-m pytest, give it the tests directory, and bing, boom, bomb. I only have 3 tests. I intend to add more in the future, but they all passed. It works. Right. So, and even like if you want to take the testing thing a bit further, if y'all are familiar with GitHub Actions, you can set up automation on your repository to do things automatically for you, such as run your tests whenever you commit a change. So here's a GitHub action that runs all the tests whenever you push a change or whenever you open a pull request or whenever you feel like hitting the big button. And all it does is it checks out the code, installs the dependencies, installs Playwright, runs the application, and then runs your tests. So you can do all of this. Pretty cool stuff. All right. So I know that was a lot of code, a lot of walkthrough. So real quick, let's recap. What did we actually see happen? In the Bulldoggy app, we started by looking at the model. Again, it was database with Pydantic models on top. And we saw that, yeah, okay, It wasn't that complex of a model, but we could see it break down and we could see the persistence layer. We saw the controller being FastAPI. We saw how it received requests to different routes via HTTP and could give responses. And those responses, for the sake of the app, were usually either HTML pages or HTML partials rendered with Jinja templates. For the view were those Jinja templates and static files that got rendered together into HTML and CSS. They were displayed in the browser, as we saw. And anytime that we wanted to do something in this little web application, our interactions were then fed back into the controller via HTMX. And that would then kind of continue the loop. It took an interaction, it generated something new, spit the page back out, put it in the browser. And that's how we got our dynamic interactions. We saw that we could go through the back door, making requests to the REST API. And we saw that we could learn what that REST API is through OpenAPI specs given to us gratis from FastAPI. So we could have our client didn't have to be a browser. It could be like some sort of HTTP client. And we tested it all with PyTest and Playwright. When we look at what was going on under the hood, we can see that pretty much everything we were doing in this application was Python based. The database, the models, the controller, the view, the API, the testing. The only thing that wasn't Python were the actual HTML and CSS pages that were delivered. Now, arguably, you could say that we were doing JavaScript because it was under the hood. HTMX is just calling JavaScript in its own library, but we didn't have to explicitly code that. All we had to do was just kind of add these attributes to our hypertext, and we were good to go. So we could focus our criticality on the application, which was entirely Python. Pretty cool, right? Full stack Python right here. Okay, so wrapping up, there's one burning question that most people probably have, whether it's appropriate or not. What about AI? Because that's what we talk about all the time, right? There wasn't any AI in this full stack Python app. Where does this fit in? I don't know. Well, actually it does. I use some AI to help build this thing. And whenever we talk about AI, we should also talk about machine learning and data science and all that stuff. And I'm sure all of y'all probably know, but what language is almost all AI and machine learning done in? Python. It's all Python. Like in the early days, R was kind of popular. Now it's not as popular as it was. It's, if anything, it's only in the academic sphere. Julia had a wave and then crashed. Maybe it's still out there. I don't know. I know some people still use it and love it, but by and large, AI machine learning stuff is all done in Python. So even if we didn't have AI directly in this app, Python was undergirding it. But there were some applications of AI that I used to help build this app. For example, I didn't make this logo myself. I generated the Bulldoggy logo using DALL-E, which is OpenAI's like image art thingy. And so what I did is I gave it a picture of my puppy dog. This is my French bulldog, Suki. And out comes Suki logofied. It did a pretty decent job, right? I mean, down to the scarf and the ears and the eyes and everything. Like, yeah, so AI right there in the logo. How else did I do it? Do you think I actually developed the styling of this app myself? Heck no. I may seem like a web developer. I can pretend to be a web developer really good. I'm not the best with CSS or HTML or making things look pretty. So what I did is I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me a login page. And it gave me a login page. And it was kind of ugly, but it was better than what I could do on my own. So I used that as my starting point for what became the Bulldoggy login page. And I just refined it. ChatGPT gave me about 3/4 of what I needed. And then I changed the color, moved some things around, and boom. So this ChatGPT helped expedite my development process of this login app. And then furthermore, when it came to testing, I showed you the basic unit, API, and UI testing, but I also did a little bit of visual testing on the side that I didn't walk through. And so I used Applitools, which is my employer, which does side-by-side visual diff using visual AI. The trick with visual AI is it's not doing pixel to pixel, it's actually looking for significant differences and pinpointing them for you. So right there, boom. AI, all helping me develop this app on the side. And all that AI is backed up by Python. So congratulations, everybody. Yay, we did it. We achieved full stack Python. Isn't that cool? Like, we did it, right? Why is this important? You might be thinking, okay, is this like a cool party trick? Is this one of those talks that's good for meetups and conferences, but not actually good for real life? I think this is legitimately important because there are a lot of people who want to be able to build cool things in software who don't necessarily want to have to learn every new tool, language, or framework in order to be able to do those cool things. Here are a couple examples. Before I show a couple examples, but keeping in mind this mantra that simple is better than complex. This is one of the points from the Zen of Python. It is something that has really impacted positively how I approach software and development. The idea that you can make complicated things, but they're really hard to maintain. They're really hard to explain. When they break, it can be spectacularly bad. Sometimes it's better to do the simple thing. It brings more people to the table. It makes things more accessible. It makes your life a whole lot easier. And so if I can develop software entirely within one stack, Python, or it could be another stack. It doesn't have to be Python. It could be Java if I'm a Java person. It could be .NET if you're a C#.NET person. It could be OCaml or Perl, right? But having to context switch across multiple different stacks can be very tough. Simplicity in one stack is better than complexity in a lot of cases. And so I can see this being significant for many different types of roles within the software community, right? Not everybody is some super senior principal, software engineer, 10x developer, superstar, rock star, ninja, whatever, right? Like, there's a very small set of people in the world, and not everybody's like that, right? There are people who just want to use Python to do cool stuff, right? So here's some examples that are very real. What if you are a researcher? Maybe you're a professor at a university, or you're a bench scientist or something. And all you want to do is do your scientific experiments, but you need to visualize and share your data with your colleagues, right? In most cases, scientists and researchers these days are using Python for their data analysis. Like, I have many friends who are kind of in that sphere, and it astounded me when part of their master's and PhD programs are Python programming 101. Why? Because they need to do the data analysis. Do you really think these people are going to learn React to share their research with others across the world? No, heck no. But do you think maybe that if they already learned Python and they want to have a better platform to share, they might check out something like Django and put it out there? Absolutely, right? Because it's more accessible to them. It's within their stack. Or what about if you are somebody like me with a testing background? What if you're a tester who's developing test automation for web apps, right? Like, I consider myself more of kind of like a, general software engineer. I have a bit of a developer background, but there are a lot of people within the testing and QA space who don't necessarily have a strong programming background. They may have been manual and exploratory testers for years, and now they're put on a project where they need to learn automation, right? I find that Python is a much easier language for folks like that to learn than other languages. And so maybe it can be easy for them to learn Python and learn PyTest and Playwright and have a lot more progress and success developing test automation. Or here, let's take a whole nother direction. I think, Laura, you mentioned one of like the little prize or giveaways was like a little Adafruit thing or something. What if you are a cosplayer? You're like really into anime, you're going to your favorite conference, and you want to build these little Adafruit things for your costume that light up, right? How are you going to program that? Python, right? Ta-da! Right? So it's, what if you are new to the world of software and you want to do some cool stuff, but you only have learned Python so far, right? Like, hey, I want to make a really cool web app, or hey, I want to make this little robot go brrr. Why should we be forcing these people who maybe have already learned Python to say, no, you got to learn like JavaScript to do that. That's kind of crappy. Think about it. You're a new person in this big, overwhelming world of software, just trying to make cool things happen. And you did your best and you learned this one thing and it was probably a challenge for you. And now you're told, yeah, everything you've learned is just a waste. Go learn something else to do the thing you want. That's not very friendly. But then there's also one more role, and I think this probably applies to a lot of us. What if you're just a bona fide Pythonista who just wants to do stuff in Python for the heck of it? Like me, I can do things in a couple different languages, but I like Python. I want to do things in Python. Why shouldn't I be able to just do them in Python? Right? It should be good enough. And certainly what we have demonstrated today, it is. Something I have learned, pardon me, something I have learned in all of my years of doing this whole programming thing, especially being in the Python community, languages are just tools, right? Some people get caught up in a language and the stack and they're doing, but I try to take a higher view of it. When I look at something like Python, I think Python transforms us from being programmers into being problem solvers, right? Our goals at the end of the day are never just to make some code. We're trying to solve some problem. We're trying to add some value. We're trying to make some really cool things. And so when you have a very powerful language like Python that can do things genuinely full stack, we can burst outside of the bubble and burst outside of the boundaries around us and really think big about the types of things we want to do and accomplish. So I think Python, like I said before, is not the second best language for that. I think it is the best language we have for that. And it's something that we as a community really have that's awesome. So all that to say, that is full stack Python. Thank you so much for attending tonight's talk and going through all those trails of code with me. If you liked what you saw in the code, here's the QR code. You can check it out from GitHub. You can follow me on Twitter at Automation Panda. Sorry. With that, we can transition to question answer.
Awesome. That was so great, Andy. Thank you so much. I have been collecting a few questions as they were coming in through the Slack and the chat. So the first one is from, so apologize if I mispronounce your name, Akshay, but how about the security of the application with SQL injection or any type of injections?
Ooh, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. The security of Bulldoggy, there ain't no security. That one is just, it's not meant to be. But I guess the greater question of how can you make sure an app is secure when you're using something like HTMX with a Python web framework like FastAPI, like Django, like any of those others. Personally, I don't think that HTMX is adding any sort of unique security concerns to that on top of what you would have to do otherwise, right? I mean, you still want to make sure that you don't have, you know, the scripting injection and all that other stuff. I'm not even a security expert. I can only speak about this much to it. But the thing is with a library like HTMX, all it is, like I said, is just AJAX calls. So any sort of security you do for like other regular API calls, you're going to have to do in this case. Things like making sure that your things are authenticated properly, that they have the proper access that's given. It's not just authentication, but also authorization for your user accounts. Making sure you can avoid any sort of like SQL injection. You don't want to be just taking things that are put into inputs and running them directly in the database. That's a big no-no, right? You can look at the OWASP top 10, follow those, same kind of stuff.
Awesome. And that seems to be super clear. But so our next question is from David Soul. How good is the support for auto-filling parameters and things like that inside of the IDE, especially for HTMX?
Oh gosh, I don't know if there's any IDE plugins for HTMX. Honestly, I haven't looked or tried. Again, I'm not an HTMX expert. I am very much a beginner showing you how to do a cool thing that I just learned how to do. That'd be an interesting Google search later, though, to be like, hey, does this exist yet? I can say that HTMX has had a small footprint in terms of the popularity of its project, but it's growing through. There's been a lot of people in the Python community in the past 2 to 3 years who have kind of caught onto it like me and been like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so there've been a couple talks about it. But then also the HTMX account on Twitter has been quite something else. They've been going crazy into memes and they're getting a lot of popularity from that. So maybe as the project becomes more popular, we might see some sort of IDE plugin to help with that. I think that could be really cool.
Awesome. And the other last question that I collected was from Jackie, asking if anyone knows how long HTMX has been around and is it extensively used?
Yeah, so I first heard about it in 2021. I think it's been around for a couple of years. It's actually the successor to another project called Intercooler. I'm not exactly sure how long that one's around, but again, it's only, like I said, been in the past couple of years that it's really kind of grown in popularity. And it's one of those things where it's becoming popular because it made an annoying problem very simple to explain, very simple to implement, and very simple to use.
Awesome. Anyone else have questions? Feel free to unmute, turn on your camera, ask away. Ron in Slack is asking for suggestions for someone that wants to learn Python. So I'm sure some of you guys can probably help them out with some links there.
Ooh, I'm gonna find some links.
If not, I will talk amongst yourself. I'm going to pull up this list for the giveaways and we'll start doing some giveaways in just a few minutes, but feel free, please chat amongst yourself.
I was going to say, I just asked ChatGPT about the autofill feature with HTMX, and it's ChatGPT's opinion that it will not interfere with autofill, that like the autofill piece kind of runs off of whatever the input's name is and some of the HTML attributes of that input. And whereas the HTMX part, like Andrew said, just kind of comes in the clutch to do the AJAX part of it. So just with that server-side interaction. So at least for ChatGPT's part of it, it's not going to interfere with populating autofill, stuff like that. And if I remember right, when you pulled up Bulldoggy at the first, when you clicked on the username field, it did pop up the little, hey, do you want to use your password for Bulldoggy?
Yeah.
In the thing. So
yeah, that was purely a browser thing. So
All right. So I am going to do a very low code version of the giveaway here. I'm just trying to copy this and put it in Excel, which is awful. Calvin always does, does normally. And then just do a random number generator and see who wins our awesome prizes. So please be patient with me. Please talk amongst yourselves as I finish this up. Should just be a few more seconds. Sure, someone can share something cool about some of their favorite tutorials and stuff or books.
Sure. So here in the Slack and in the Zoom, I'm going to paste a link to the TAU course on PyTest in case anyone is interested.
Thank you.
Just based on what I learned with that automate the boring stuff with Python course that's referenced within the chat there. We have an upcoming sales conference, and some of the more posh hotels always get snatched up real quickly. So I was able to write a Selenium script they'll go in every 6 seconds and check for me to see when it came available. And then using a free Twilio account, send me a text to warn me when, hey, this hotel's ready.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's literally awesome.
Hey, Andrew, one of the questions in the Slack was, if you were going to host this particular app, where would you kind of host? I mean, I know like you said, it's not necessarily hostable, but like, where would you host a Python app if you had to choose?
Like, oh gosh, it's been a while since I've had to. In the past, I hosted on Heroku because it was free and it was easy.
Used to be. Too soon.
I mean,
too soon.
If I were to do something small scale now, I mean, I might just get like a DigitalOcean droplet and throw it out there, like whoop-de-doo, right? I mean, I've used Azure in the past. I might do something there, right? Gosh, honestly, what I would do, I would go to Google and be like, what's the best place to host a Python app these days?
Fly.io seems to be coming along very nicely.
Oh, what was it called?
Fly.io.
Oh, okay.
I believe that some of the Django project leaders are writing some stuff up there.
Nice. Oh, that looks easy. Oh.
And I was going to say, with the web scraping, we actually used it to find COVID vaccination appointments for folks.
Whoa.
Back when appointments were hard to get. We were helping folks get them, and we had scripts that would go out and find them appointments near them if we could.
What was the name?
Fly.io. I'll put it in the chat there.
Andrew, I have a question. This is Akshay. Have you tried test containers for Python?
I have not personally.
Okay.
There's a what's it called? It's a tool out there called Coherence.
Okay.
With Coherence, I ran into them at PyCon. Yeah, let me share this out to y'all. That they do kind of Python test container stuff. They're very Python forward. They're a small company, but check it out. That might be something that could help.